Hello, my name is Adam Brooks. I'm a publican with a passion for hospitality, and I'm equally passionate about my activism work, bringing social issues into the spotlight. I often get sentimental about the good old days in pubs, days when lots of customers would go to the pub, meet friends, enjoy the atmosphere, and because food and drink was affordable back then, they come back regularly. But all that changed in 2020. For me and others like me, this was just the beginning of the nightmare. Quickly, we were ordered to close our venues to the public. Every business in hospitality had to comply, or else the COVID crisis soon grew into a worldwide international political crisis. Predictably, this led to a chain reaction, with a soon-to-follow energy crisis bringing huge energy bills. This enormously stressful time was relentless. Business owners had no choice but to make painful decisions. Loyal staff were laid off through no fault of their own. Hospitality businesses were not only closing their doors, many were folding their businesses too. In August alone, just when it seemed it couldn't get worse, it did. The harsh cost of living crisis was spreading everywhere. People were skinned. Business owners and customers were, and still are, in the same boat, being casualties of disreputable forces. However, it doesn't have to remain this way, because at heart most people want to help each other. So as a business owner, you may be saying, what about my crippling big energy bills? Help is available. What about falling footfall? Help is available. What about optimizing all my business operations? Help is available. What about confusing legislation? Help is available. The list goes on. You are not alone in this post-COVID nightmare. On this webinar, we have experts who can help your company survive and thrive again. Today, you'll learn practical and demonstrable solutions to apply to your business. Even better, you'll discover a network to provide ongoing help and support. Please share what you learned today, because I guarantee others would appreciate it.
I'm Darren Jones. I'm Director at Carbon Shore Energy Consultancy. We help businesses reduce their energy costs, reduce their carbon footprint, very easy and straightforward. Our guests today, if we go in alphabetical order, that doesn't matter if you start with surname, first name or business name, it'll all be exactly the same. So Alison, if you want to introduce yourself and your company and what you do.
Hi Darren, sure. So I'm the founder of CityStack, and I launched an initiative to support independent pubs following the pandemic. So basically it's a system that allows independent pubs to generate footfall through a discount scheme with a nice gift for pub lovers that we launched.
Excellent. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Darren. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Taylor. I'm a partner at Keystone Law. I'm a licensing and hospitality lawyer and specialist. I've been doing that for 14 years. I help operators in hospitality to obtain new licenses, to acquire businesses that have got existing licenses, and to help to protect them once they've made that acquisition. I also assist with any enforcement action, etc., which we'll talk a little bit about during the webinar. And I'm also a HR expert and an executive coach.
Excellent. Rachel, last but not least.
Hello, I'm Rachel Thomson. I currently work with Metropolitan Gaming in their food and beverage division. We have 8 casinos in the UK and 3 in Egypt, so it's a really, really fun and dynamic place to work, I can assure you. And we're sort of working on a massive strategy for the F&B division and how we're going to grow that and sort of come to market from an external perspective.
Excellent. Very, very simply as well, this webinar that we're all here to talk about is going to be about the cost of living crisis and how that's impacting the hospitality sector and the solutions that you guys have got. So I'm gonna start with the person that's actually working in the hospitality sector at the moment, being Rachel. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the challenges that are facing you at Metropolitan and what you're doing about them?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, it's quite a broad question. There's so much that I can discuss on this, but I think from a high level, obviously, look, I mean, the cost of living crisis has affected not only us, but our employees as well. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, sadly, that we're sort of feeling the ripple effect from. In terms of the businesses themselves, obviously, we're facing, supplier increases, so your cost of product has increased. And for us to then, turn the needle and really ramp up our prices, it's it's really not sensical in a particular market where disposable income doesn't really. Yeah, exactly. Exist really. Obviously, you've got your wealthy earners. They're fine in sort of premium venues, premium restaurants with the fine dining, the fresh food, the Chateaubriands, all that kind of stuff. They're fine and they're going to survive whatever crisis comes because those earners have that revenue and that income. But obviously, with this sort of middle and lower market, it's always going to fluctuate. And I think that as business leaders, you're constantly strategizing. It could be. I think I was talking to you before about this, but you can have a 5-year strategy. So I can say, okay, I'm going to make X, Y, Z. I've budgeted for this. I forecasted for this. And then all of a sudden COVID hits and it completely depletes. It doesn't exist anymore. That strategy kind of goes in the bin. And how do you as leaders sort of mitigate that with your employees and your business? And also there are sort of loads of parameters around that of what we can do and what we have done. I think the biggest thing we're working on really is just understanding what the trends are. So for example, looking into sort of the statistics, 16% of the UK are now meat free. So if you looked at that 5 years ago, that's not true. That didn't exist. What's vegan, what's vegetarian, and now it's such a huge market. So I'm strategizing and spearheading a sort of brand new menu as such that will go live in all of our casinos to match with that. And also it has to be competitively priced. So it's quite a big piece of work essentially. But really adapting to trends is number one, really, I think, in terms of how we can get through the crisis. But more so, the biggest challenge is that income piece versus us needing to increase our prices. It'd be very easy to say, okay, 20% flat increase on all drinks, all food, but you'll lose probably 40% of your customers. So lots of work can go into if you're in fresh food, for example. And you're sort of having we do a lot of work on product swap. So before we would put on a loin of a cod loin, for example, but now we're actually looking at that, saying maybe we use pollock instead, but a really good quality pollock and things like that to still offer that fish and still offer that protein. But looking at ways of cutting those costs for us, because it's really, really challenging in terms of the rising costs from a food and drink perspective. And you're up against big pub companies. So you're going to have those big boys who are getting the best deals you've ever seen. We're not going to get that. We're not going to get a barrel at a GP of 70% on a barrel. So it's really just working from a sort of small to middle sized business, what we can do within the kind of hospitality sector, how we can drive that. And of course the employee perspective as well. It's so big. I'm huge on people, and Metropolitan Gaming are exactly the same. I think anywhere I've worked, it's a human industry, isn't it? Hospitality is about the people. If we don't have the people, we don't exist. It's that smiley face, that big character, big sort of personality. And when you hear stories of your chef who comes up to you and says, I can't really pay rent this month, you're thinking, wow, what can I do to help you? How can I sort of fix this issue? And sometimes I can't, sometimes we can't. We do everything we can to do that. But things that you can do, I think I was speaking about wage stream before. So wage stream is actually a kind of it's used quite widely in the market, but it allows the employee to withdraw some of their sort of salary before they're paid. So if you know that you've got an MOT, you need 4 new tyres, we know how annoying that is and how it's an unprecedented cost. This allows the employee to withdraw the money and sort of manage their finances in a better way. And what you can do as well is sort of look at that in terms of, are they withdrawing 5 months in a row all of their salary? That's a problem, and we need to sort of identify that and help that employee and things like that. So yeah, there's so many topics I could go through with this, but primarily it's definitely the cost of product is huge and a massive hit on all P&Ls. The profit and loss accounts that I look at now versus what I was looking at 10 years ago. I mean, there's such a gap in terms of your drop through, and also your KPIs have to change. So when you're budgeting at a GP of 20%, it's actually probably now about 28%. So you have to shift your mindset from a commercial standpoint as well. So yeah.
Is it a case that you're moving then? Sorry, you're talking about the rising costs as well as falling footfall. Is it a case then that if prices are rising all the time, your margins are coming down? Does it then, turn to you to then start looking at ways of driving extra footfall so that you're making lower margin of everything but trying to sell more of it? Is that kind of the new model that's going in there, with the exception of the premium end of the market that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, now more than ever, we are sort of, I'm going to say promo driven. If you see a 2 for 10, that's so much more attractive. And I think that, yes, that is definitely a market to look at. And also it is understanding that volume is key. And when you look at your sort of, we call them shoulder times. So when, say, for example, we have James Martin in Manchester, which is a stunning restaurant. And obviously James Martin is a phenomenal chef. So we're very privileged to have that in our portfolio. And if there is an evening, say a Wednesday evening between, let's say, 7 and 9, that something is not, it's a quiet time, you can look at offers or ways to drive volume into that time, but it has to be commercially feasible. You would never do anything that is going to affect devalue your brand. I think that's a big thing that is huge. I'm sure Alison gets this with this, but you never want to have that challenge of them saying, it's going to devalue. It's actually not. It's actually going to, enrich your brand and drive volume into there. But 100%, yeah, it's a lot of it now is on volume. And also looking at your business models, if we operate the entire model from a labor perspective, from a stock perspective, from a gas, electricity, all of that, and then we can look at franchising. So bringing in an operator on a model where you do a revenue share. So you take that whole building, you sort of look after that, and then give us some revenues. So there's new avenues to explore, and I think those who are a bit protective of their businesses have definitely shifted mentality to bring in experts who know what they're doing, and sort of form a partnership is quite common now, actually.
Okay, so that's one of the ways to get is the partnerships and bringing in, like you said, people that are expert in their areas. That's an interesting, different angle that I've not heard of.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Alison's angle is going to lean more on the promotional side of things. So I'm going to let Alison explain a little bit more about what CityStack does and how that can be applied to businesses similar to Metropolitan. So Alison, what is it that CityStack is, and what do you do for both pubs and for the cost of living?
Yeah, of course. So basically, we came to the conclusion and to the observation that the pubs have less footfall, obviously. The reason being the inflation. And as you mentioned, Rachel, the volume is key. So when you're a small business, you cannot buy you cannot get from your supplier very cheap prices, which obviously is shown on the menu for the consumers. So that's why we created a discount system. So it's I just show it quickly because it's always easier for people to see it for those who look at the camera, but basically it's a £25 stack of beer mats that gives our customers £100 worth of food and drink at any 10 of our now almost 16 independent pubs across London. So each pack comes with a special beer mat that they bring, they have it stamped, and they get £10 off their bill, and they can do it at 10 different pubs. And you mentioned about, you were sharing about the challenges regarding some hospitality businesses who don't want to make their brand look cheaper. And it's actually something I was expecting when I launched the business. I was expecting to have that objection quite a lot. But in the end, because our business model is based on a gift that the customer purchase, in our situation, they buy £25. The pubs don't really receive that objection that way, and they rather see it as being part of a premium collection. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is, I don't think offering bargains or discounts shows a feeling of cheap. It just generates the occasion, and it encourages people to come to your place for a very specific time or occasion. So yeah, just to answer on the discount parts.
Well, you've got a nice angle with what you're doing, Alison, as well, because you're championing independent pubs rather than joining a chain and saying that this is something that a chain could do. You're going to independent pubs and introducing a scheme effectively that the bigger chains might have been able to introduce and roll out. So I know that Stonegate have got a new app where you can get discounts and earn points and all these bits and pieces. Nice and easy for them because they've got all of these great big budgets and low overhead, well, not low overheads, but lower costs for buying food and drink because of the buying power that they've got that the independents don't necessarily have. But I think we were chatting the other day. You were saying that you had issues. One of the objections you had was from the tied pubs that have got the higher costs because of obviously they're stuck with, they can only go to one supplier for their beer and some of their other their drinks.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you say
I
to
think,
somebody that's tired?
well, I think for somebody that is tight, the publicans, they know how to calculate their margins. They're great business owners, so if they are too tight, then like obviously like there's no point in making them losing business. However, we see some pubs that decide to join us, even though their margin are not amazing, because they're betting on the fact that it's a discount you give once. So our discount is a £10 off from £20 spent. So one might say, well, it's 50%, but actually most of our customers would stay put for another pint, another round. And the goal is really to be considered not as a loyalty program for the pub perspective, but more as an acquisition system. So once the customer discover the pub, if they like it, they will come back. And that's what I always say to any landlord that I meet. And the landlords we on board, they have very nice pubs. They all have something specific that I know people would love. So I'm pretty confident on the fact that people come back afterwards. And once they have discovered that place, especially for pubs that are not on the main road, like many groups or chains are showing, like they're directly on the main near the station where you have high footfall. And once you discover hidden street gems, then you want to go back there. But you need to make that little effort and encourage them to go a bit further and not stay on the main streets.
Sorry, we've got someone trying to come into the meeting. Yeah, I get that what you're trying to do is you're trying to push the people to come into the pub for the first time, so they can experience the pub, feel the pub, and then they can see whether they like the atmosphere, the food and the drink and stuff like that, as well. But that's getting them in the door for the first time.
Exactly.
Then you've got
step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and to meet new people as well was the other thing that we were talking about, because I think you were doing another scheme where you were doing it's not a pub crawl, but you were effectively you had different night at a different venue where you had a band playing and you followed the band around. What was that? Who
Yeah,
arranged?
exactly.
What was that like?
We organized that with so it was our first indie pub tour. So we organized that with the group called Brave New Broken Hearts Club, and the goal was just to create some momentum and have people. So we had like one gig per week, and we did across different venues in London. And I think people really enjoyed the fact that they knew that when they would go there, they would meet other pub passionates and people who are really support independent pubs. Also, I come back to what you were saying, Rachel. You were talking about the shift in behavior, and I think it's very true. You were saying that people, for example, eat less meat. They also drink less, and what they're expecting now from pubs, it's not like in like 10 or 20 years ago where you just go to the pub or to a place just to have a pint and a chat. People now, and especially younger generations, they really expect to have more an experience, like a unique experience, with that fear of missing out. And we see that more and more pubs, for example, organize more pub quiz, they organize more events to attract people. And I think that thing that we organized with the Indie Pub Tour was sort of into that same scope of trying to create momentum.
Who buys the beer mats that you're selling? Obviously it makes sense to spend 25 quid to get 100 quid off. Who wouldn't do that? But who's actually buying into it? What's the kind of customer that you're finding buys into this more than anyone else? Obviously the pubs buy into it, but what about the customers?
Yeah, we have it's quite a wide range. We have a lot of couples who like to buy it for themselves and just browse and pick on a Sunday which roast should we go to. We have some people who buy it for themselves when they really enjoy discovering new pubs. And a lot of our audience is actually people who want to gift someone they love. So it's a very nice gift for Christmas. For Christmas, it's our biggest season, but it works as well for birthday party. We have also some corporates who buy it to treat their employees and partners because we make some personalized version. So really it's about buying a gift for someone you like that they will enjoy, of course, but also it's a way of showing that with that gift to support independent and local businesses as well.
Excellent. So we've bearing in mind that you've got challenges for the pubs and other, you know, hospitality venues. You've got restaurants, bars, and hotels and whatnot. Have you got any more plans for CityStack to go into different regions, different types of venue or anything like that? Perhaps different type of offering.
Yes, we discuss with a different kind of business. For example, we are in discussion with some independent breweries who'd love to create a collection dedicated to beer lovers. And yeah, obviously, like new cities would be a next target to develop across the UK. And I think that we are also thinking about maybe developing an app, even though the tangible part of the gift is very attractive for people. So I think we'll always have that part in our mix.
Okay, great. I'm going to come to Sarah because you've been awfully quiet and I've been rambling off. With Alison alluding to the pub landlords and the struggles that they've got with getting foot through the door. I think the question really on people's mind when it comes to pubs is, you know, they're shutting down at a rate and we're losing them. Is that mainly down to not just the costs of everything and the falling footfall, but is that down to legislation that licensing laws and stuff like that? Is that affecting them, or is there any other aspects of licensing and what you do that's affecting the industry?
I think the landscape's just become more difficult in terms, not as in the licensing process, but certainly I think since COVID, as we saw in Adam's video in the intro, that was really the marker of big change. And I don't think we've anywhere near recovered since then. So you've had a perfect storm of COVID and being closed down for so long and people's attitudes changing to then people wanting to go out, but obviously lots of operators unfortunately didn't survive the pandemic, or they are now paying back humongous bounce back loans which they've got hanging over them. So it's really that challenge that I see for clients from that point of view of trying to generate as much income as possible to sort of get back onto an even keel. But then of course you've got the perfect storm of inflation, you've got energy costs increasing, etc. One thing I've really noticed is a shortage of staff, which has been a real challenge. That's been a massive challenge, I think, across the board. And I act for independents, I act for chains, I act for high-end restaurants, I act for independent music venues, and although their challenges are all very different, there's a combination of things that are all the same, because inevitably things just cost more. So one example is door staff. So during the pandemic, premises were closed, people needed to work, they went to other industries. Unfortunately, they didn't always come back. What we saw then is a shortage. So people are fighting for good quality door staff, and we end up in a situation where the hourly rate creeps up and it's just not viable for certain premises to pay, £25 an hour for good door staff. I think where I've really seen the cost of living and the cost of everything crisis hit in respect of that is where you lose great staff, be it staff that work behind the bar or in the kitchen or on the front line door staff front. If you lose that experience and you bring in less experienced people, that tends to be when things go wrong. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with the cost of goods and the national living wage and the minimum wage has gone up and there's changes to national insurance, the last thing you then want is for something to go wrong and then you get enforcement action and you've got to defend a review. So it's things like that where I've really seen either people pushing the envelope to do different things they wouldn't normally do, going out of their comfort zone to try and generate that income. And Alison's absolutely right. It is all about the experience now. Customers for quite a long time, and I think even before COVID, we were seeing more sort of experiential venues of axe throwing and pottery making and stuff like that going on in licensed premises. But people are really having to drill down now into what they can do that's different to set them apart from everybody else. So, which is great because it breeds that creativity. But on the converse of that, sometimes people can do things they wouldn't normally do and unfortunately get themselves in trouble, which leads to issues further down the line, I think.
So what when they've got these issues, obviously your job is to help people with these reviews when they come up. What do you advise the people do to try and avoid that action and trying to avoid that review that could put their license in jeopardy.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the circumstances. That inevitably every licensed premises in the country will have issues at some point. You'll never stop that. It really comes down to what Rachel touched on in the beginning. You know, we're a people business, we're a people industry. That lends to not only dealing with your staff and your customers and having that smiley face, but it's all about relationships. It's building relationships with your neighbours. It's building relationships with the authorities as well, so that if the worst does happen, at least you've got that bridge that you can speak to them, and you know as long as you're reasonable and they are on the other side, that you've got some chance of being able to navigate your way through it and avoiding the worst type of enforcement action. Unfortunately, it does happen. Unfortunately, it does sometimes cost money. Unfortunately, sometimes it leads to people losing their licenses, but it's really the work that you can do before. But it's also training your staff as well, which when you've got a high churn or you're struggling to get staff, that can be really difficult.
It's not just what you're saying there as well. It's about relationships as well with, you know, the local authorities, the police, you know, local residents as well, residents associations. You know,
exactly.
The amount of pubs and clubs and bars around Soho, they're getting shut down because people are moving into Soho and then complaining about noise. Is ridiculous. But you know, that's not really helped as well by the other impacts and the other cost of living crisis that's being brought on by us. We've just got a new government come in, and that's then going to introduce to us further, you know, challenges down the line of, you know, what's the laws coming next. You know, Rachel was talking earlier about planning ahead. You can't really plan ahead unless you know what's coming. And at the moment, it's all a little bit up in the air. I know we've just had the election. We've had some announcements, but then we've got local governments as well and other restrictions. You've got things like, you know, ULEZ being expanded. You've got the congestion charge. You've got parking restrictions, which are coming in everywhere. The cost of parking skyrocketed. That's reducing people wanting to go places. So who's going to help out with that on the government side? Do we start lobbying them for stuff like that? What's the answer there, do you think?
I think I think that's always been the answer. I mean, in terms of legislation, we've had changes recently to the pavement licence regime, so that did get changed during COVID because it used to be quite a long, convoluted process, and to be fair to the government at the time, they did move swiftly to make that more streamlined and cheaper for operators. So that's now been enshrined in new law that we've got. That's not now the sort of extended law from the pandemic. So that's reduced the burden, it's reduced costs. It also means people can put more seating outside if they want to. It's just an easier process. It also means that, heaven forbid, we end up in another situation like before. You know we can adapt. You know, you can seat people outside. You've got that option. In terms of other things, I mean, Martin's Law is a classic example. So this is the anti-terrorism legislation that's been tabled in our previous government. It's been sort of passed over in the wash-up provisions that have gone over from the Tory government to the Labour government, but we still don't actually have any draft legislation that is moving through Parliament at the moment. So we know that something is coming. We've got a rough idea of potentially what it may look like, but you know, there was headlines of the average cost of the implementation of this being £80,000, which when you say that to operators that are already struggling, you know, is quite a lot to take on. It now transpires that that's probably going to be the sort of 800 plus capacity larger venues, but even still, if you run a large venue, you know, with the pressures of everything else, you can quite easily see how it all mounts up and venues just don't become viable anymore.
One of the largest club brands in the UK is not long gone busts. You know,
exactly.
You know, they were trying to say reassure staff, say we're still open, we're going to be open. Don't worry about your job. And then within a matter of, I think it was a couple of weeks, they just said sorry that, you know, venues are not going to open anymore, and that was it. They were rolled up.
Yeah, and we talked about, I mean, the conversation previously, we've talked about, you know, economies of scales and big pub companies that can absorb those costs to an extent. You do look at that particular operator and you think, if they can't make nightclubs work, what hope is there, you know, for anybody else? Yeah, that's exactly it.
But sometimes it does have that adverse effect that you've grown so much, and then your margins become so small. Again, Alison was earlier talking about the Tide pubs because their margins are small.
Yes.
If there's any changes, you know, and if you're stuck into a contract with your landlord, if your rents go up all of a sudden, and that's your margin gone.
Exactly.
You're really on the fine line, and I think this is cost of living crisis is going two ways. It's people can't afford pubs because they've not got the disposable income to do it. You've got the people that have got, you know, ever increasing overheads. I mean, look, I'm in energy, you know, you haven't got to tell me about what's going on with energy prices. I know they're coming down now, finally, thank God, knock on wood, that they're not going to shoot back up again. But at the same time, if we're in a position where, you know, we've got this double whammy of prices going up, hopefully now inflation's settling down, hopefully the Bank of England starts reducing rates, and that starts releasing a bit of money back into the economy through, you know, lower rents, lower mortgages and stuff like that, and lower borrowing costs, not just for businesses but for at home as well. What do you think is going to be next then, in terms of where does the economy go from there in terms of looking for growth? Sarah, you were saying high costs and high loan repayments and stuff. What is the next steps for the hospitality sector to get out of this? That's to everybody. Anyone can answer that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see with the new government what sort of things people are lobbying for immediately. I mean, VAT has been a huge one that, you know, the likes of Sacha Lord, etc., and the NTIA have been lobbying heavily on a VAT cut. So we'll see. But things like live music venues, ticket prices, you know, VAT on those types of things, where you've got, again, that experience, a different type of venue. But again, you've got different issues for different types, different corners of the hospitality industry, and Rachel will be able to tell you better than me what sort of the immediate sort of red lights are.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great point there on tax as well, because if we talk about like the world stage, and if you want to grow, you know, the UK in that, we're just so far from the rest of Europe and things like that. And obviously, I spent time in Dubai, so I was in a world of no tax for quite a while, and it was booming. It was absolutely booming because that wasn't even a thought. And obviously, your pure sort of cash flows looked incredibly good. And I think from a sort of tax perspective, that is not. And I've obviously backed Sacha Lord. I think he's a fantastic ambassador for all things hospitality. But that would be a huge shift because I do believe we don't have a lot of international influence in our market right now. I think it's quite predominant. Obviously, you've got some key brands, but they're very much your mainstream brands, right? So if we talk about, you know, entrepreneurs coming over with really cool concepts and really, really fun, and I think everyone's kind of touched on this, but the experimental sort of dining and things like, they are so big at the moment. So what we're doing actually is we have some restaurants. We've got one in Brighton. Oh, sorry, go on. Hey,
get salt in. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, get him in. But he's a bit expensive. He's a bit too expensive. But yeah, so you know, in terms of what we're doing essentially is we're looking at our portfolio like a blank canvas. So we have a restaurant in Brighton, and we're going, right, okay, if we actually change the restaurant into a really cool sports bar, that's probably going to work more than the restaurant itself. And it's been big and bold with those decisions. So as much as we're relying on government, I would also challenge that we do have to rely on ourselves to begin to think out the box, because there are a lot of operators who are very much stuck in, I'm a pub, I serve a Sunday roast, and that's it. And to get out of that would be a big shift. Like you were saying, Sarah, the live music, all that kind of stuff, it is just, it's key. It's kind of king at the moment. And I think we have to move with the times. Alongside that, what comes with that is aligning our strategies from a marketing perspective. If we talk about SEO, SEM, digital, I mean, not everyone is there yet. Not everyone understands it enough. You know, I don't think we're all talking that language. You know, sometimes I speak to people, I'm like, okay, your SEO is quite weak. What is that? Okay, sure. So, you know, it's a real education piece, I believe, as well, in order for us to start moving in the right direction. And in terms of, you know, we were talking a lot about what's attracting guests. I think in order to attract our guests, we do have to evolve. So when we talk about stuff like sustainability, for example, that's such a conscious thing for people now. Before, no one would care if you put, you know, glass bottles in whatever bin, or you didn't do recycling. It was, oh my God, why are you doing that? But now it's like, are you recycling? How are you doing that? Show me. And I think from you know, on our menus, looking at carbon labeling, you know, seeing that little leaf on there with, you know, what our emissions are and stuff, that brings you guests, and that will bring people off their sofas at home home. So I would definitely agree that the government needs to do a lot of work on, our sort of things that they've put in place, VAT being a huge thing, and obviously licensing and things like that are preventing us. And I think what Sarah was saying was so interesting about pavement licenses. I was going to raise that as well, because as an operator, I'll give you an example. We're creating a new terrace in Leicester Square, which is going to be really cool. And obviously there's pavement licenses and stuff, but what I would also like to do is understand how we can get as much advertising outside as possible, but there are restrictions. So this is probably from a previous business perspective. If I want to put 4 A boards outside of a pub, Westminster Council will come over and say absolutely not, so there are some frictions there. We want to do everything we can, but we actually can't, and sometimes people can't understand that, essentially, and so on. But I guess, look, from my perspective anyway, I'm sort of really positive in this kind of strategic way of thinking, and I think everyone really should be switching their mentality to think out of the box. Think, do you know what? And I say to my team, I say honestly, come into your business tomorrow as if you've never been in this pub before in your life. What would you do? I'm like, act as if you're not loyal to anyone. You don't care if they're going to be annoyed if you say this is bad. Come in with a fresh mind, and it really helps you to go, actually, I need to do more of this, more of that. That menu actually doesn't read very well, and sort of looking at this and reigniting that sort of passion, because everyone's quite deflated, right? It's not very positive right now. We're all under the pressure. There's, you guys deal with that a lot more than I do, but in terms of, dealing with the people who are really feeling the hit financially, and I think that the it's 15% of the UK are seeking debt advice right now. So that is quite a large amount of people if you think of the population.
Made a good point on there. Actually, she's just pointed out that a level of consistency from local governments would be a
that's spot on. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rachel. The issue that you've got is particularly where you've got a chain or you've got businesses in different cities. What you can do in one, you can't do in the other. So the Westminster example is a perfect example. You might have an operations manager that manages a few sites, and they'll say, well, why can I do it here but I can't do it there? So that's spot on.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess I'm going to come back to the carbon thing you were talking about earlier, because that's my bag. I think that there's a bit of a misconception around carbon, because as much as the customer wants it because they want to see that you're doing it,
yes,
the owners of businesses get worried because there's going to be a cost associated with that. But that's not really the case, because if you've got an establishment, if you're going to lower your energy usage, you're actually going to save money, especially now with energy prices where they are. So when you start talking to people about carbon reduction and carbon footprints, one, it will reduce your energy costs if you're looking at energy related spend. Two, if you start looking at things like recycling and things like that, that'll actually potentially reduce your waste collection and trying to reduce the weight, the products that you're bringing in, to make sure that they've not got as much plastics in it and stuff like that when it come in. I mean, Tesco's, for example, when you go in there now, you used to get the tray of mints, but now it comes in a little packet that's you just rip it open and it goes. I know that because I'm having spaghetti bolognese for dinner tonight. Sorry, I bought it. But simple things like that, little tweaks that you can make to your packaging that you guys are using. I know that Alison's packaging as well. You're all recyclable packaging as well on your product, aren't you, Alison? If I remember rightly, we were talking about that. Yeah. So everybody's doing it, but it doesn't take away from the product at all, introducing stuff like that. I'm also a little bit wary of the time at the moment, everyone, because we're coming up to an hour now. Has anyone got any final little bits that they want to say about the cost of living crisis and what they're doing in order to help hospitality?
Yeah, I just have a comment, if I can come back on. Basically, Rachel, you were raising the fact that there are two ways of seeing it. There was one part regarding what the government can do, and there is another part which is more like what you can do yourself to attract more people. I think most of hospitality businesses, I find they have catch up quite well in terms of even digital ways. Like most of them are on Instagram communicating. Most of them offer this experience part. Like you can find pub quiz, you can find a specific animation. There is also the shift in the way people consume, so they drink less. And I think among all the pubs that I work with, not a single one doesn't offer alcohol-free beer. But I think on the more macro level, there is still some things that the government can impact on. And the first thing, and it was mentioned, I've seen in the chat about the consistency as well. So I think there is consistency and there is also long-term vision. And when you have whatever you decide to do on the tax level, on the VAT, if you just decide it for the next 6 months, it doesn't put people in enough confidence to build a business. And the second part is, I'm talking only about independent businesses, so like very small businesses. I think there are some works that can be done around the rent, because I've seen some awful stories of landlords and landladies I've been working on, which have made tremendous efforts in all of these experience parts, attract new customers, made the success out of the business, and ended up having the rent increase so much that they no longer get good margin out of the business. So to answer your initial question, Darren, I think these are the two parts that could help from a governmental perspective as well.
Anyone else want to talk about cost of living? No.
I think, Darren, from my point of view, we touched on it very briefly. You'd mentioned people that move to certain areas and then complain. We talked about the experience, and Rachel's absolutely right. They're looking at the what you can do, but I think with that comes the danger of potentially causing disruption to those around or people that have recently moved. I've noticed after COVID as well, I think that neighbours had a period of almost 2 years of complete silence. So now they're really sensitive to anything that's out of the ordinary. So I think whilst operators need to look at what other things they can do, what alternative things, how they can pivot their businesses, the planning is key and the relationship building is key before they do that, because that then lessens the chance of having to spend money on defending reviews or enforcement action and paying money to lawyers, fortunately for them. So a little bit of planning, maybe a little bit of spend in the beginning, rather than a lot of spend at the other side of it when you know it's difficult to stop that train.
It's like going to the gym, and in order to keep yourself fit and healthy, you know, a little bit of pain, go to the gym an hour once. However long you go to the gym for, I wouldn't know.
Exactly.
In order to not get sick further down the line. Lee's just made another great point as well, is that about during COVID, the world had adapted itself to keeping people inside their homes, and now there's got to be a focus on stakeholders, including the operators, to get people back into the towns and the cities. Actually, that's quite an interesting point, because I know that Alison's in targeting corporates, what you're looking to do is to say to the the owners of the big businesses, whether they're accountants, solicitors, wherever, come back into the office, and we'll reward you. Go and enjoy a pint down the pub on us, sort of thing. Well, not quite, but yeah. And the other thing as well is the local authorities aren't helping by driving people away. They want to drive people back into the cities, but they're introducing ULEZ, congestion charge, parking charges, and they need to find a way to that. It used to be that you'd be able to stop for 30 minutes on the side of the roads in order to run into a shop. They've got rid of things like that now, and it's ridiculous, really.
Yeah, it's really true. And if you even look at, I was speaking to this with some of the team before about train prices. So for you to go peak to go to work as an employee, say you're earning, minimum wage, it happens. There are people paying that. I mean, it's just extortionate, So you're losing workforce. You're also, it was a great point by Sarah regarding employees and stuff like that. And as you say, we need to drive people into the city. And even a simple thing like the bloody weather. It's been raining.
Or the football.
Where's the sun?
Even the football, we've got licensing's been extended now until 1 o'clock tomorrow night because of England are in the semi-final. Wouldn't it have been great if Scotland had got into a semi-final as well on the other side of the draw? We would have had, tonight we could have been out till 1 o'clock. I know it's really bitter. I'm really sorry.
It's a very hard topic, okay?
I know, but things like that would help, wouldn't it? So
I know
we've got the Olympics coming up. We've got all these things, great things to look forward to as hospitality owners. I know Adam's. The reason that Adam's so busy and couldn't actually make it on today is because he's so busy with the football and he's got other things going on as well in terms of running the hospitality business. Let's face it, that's what he's doing. But he's also getting out there and he's waving the flag and sounding the horn for the industry as well. He's on GB News once a week, Adam, and he's talking about all of the challenges in the same way that we're doing this. But what he's doing sounds like he's complaining when he's not. He's asking for solutions to be implemented in the same way that we're trying to do that as well today.
Totally. I think just one more point on the getting people there as well is obviously in that when we had COVID, the barbecue in the garden, that was a thing, right? But the problem is it's still a thing. So when it is sunny, people are actually, you know, getting a barbecue and having a beer. You can get, and I think there was a thing in the press, I don't know if you saw that, about the Co-op who advertised about pizza and beer. Why go out to a pub when you can come have it at home? And, you know, it's just, and we all fight, you know, you have your market, let us have ours, right? So yeah, there's a lot in there.
Businesses coming out there now, Rachel. I've got to say this because my friend owned, he still owns, owned a burger company, and he had a shop. He had a shop.
Yeah.
He was doing Deliveroo and all of the other, you know, delivery services, and they were getting people coming and taking the food home. But they had a venue, and people were going to the venue. Now he shut the venue down, and now one of the things that he started doing is he's doing barbecues at home for people using his brand and his. So Meat Stop, big shout out to Ben at Meat Stop. He's now going in and he's doing barbecue sets for people and going, and they're doing like mini at home festivals rather than going to festivals. You can have a festival at home if you've got a big enough garden and the weather's nice.
Yeah.
You have to. He keeps on saying to people, you have to pay extra for the weather. And he'll bring a good sunshine with him as well. But I don't know if he'll get away with that for very long because it's not here anymore.
I think that's an important point, Darren, just to touch on that. You know, if we've got no nighttime economy, that impacts the daytime economy as well. You know, everything, it's not just pubs and restaurants, it's also shops, takeaways, etc. Everything is reliant on everything else.
Yeah.
And really important that when we look back at the pandemic, we look at the impact on people's mental health when they've not got that sense of community that you get by going out to a pub or a restaurant. So we need people like Adam out there and us doing these kind of things to advocate for the whole industry.
We absolutely do. And the other thing as well is we've got, with the pandemic, people got used to being at home. So whereas, you know, having a takeaway on a Friday night used to be the thing, because people were sat at home rather than going to the shops, you know, because the queues were out the door and all of that, people were going, oh, do you know what, I can't be bothered, I'll go tomorrow, I'll go home, I'll on the app, order whatever it might be, whether it's a McDonald's or KFC. You could order it on your app and you could sit on at home and it come to you.
Yeah.
And that stopped people going out as well. And I think people are still in that mindset of got the app. Here we go. Let's get started.
The convenience always wins. No matter what you like, what great product or great concept you want to go. Even, you know, if you have great good resolutions. It's very hard when it's so easy to order on an app. And I know a lot of people myself who like just got the habit of staying home. Also, it's a bit like a vicious circle because the less people go to the pub, the more the pubs close. The more pubs close, the more you need to walk more to go to the next pub next door. But if there is a way to encourage people, I think the key part is exactly about the community part and the connection part.
And it's the big thing. People used to go to the pub on a Friday and a Saturday night, and that was where they'd go to meet their friends.
Yeah.
And now you've got to go and find those experiences to go and excuses to go and find that now. Whereas, you know, Adam used to run the most successful nightclub in Essex, you know, and the same people would turn in and out every day, you know, Friday, Saturday. I think he even started opening on Thursdays, which was unheard of, you know, in the early 2000s when he was going and doing that.
Yeah, totally. But Thursday's a new Friday, right? That's it. It's changed. And who would have known that a weekday would have, you know, a key night that we've had all of our lives would change. And that just shows you the shifts that are being taken. By 2025, it might be Wednesday as a new Friday. You know, we just don't know. So again, it's very challenging. But I think all of these suggestions are fantastic. And obviously the government have a lot to play in terms of helping us because we're doing everything we can, you know, to forensically analyse how do we get people in and how do we keep them here. So hard times, but I think people in hospitality are just so resilient, and it's always such a pleasure to be part of the hospitality. Definitely.
Yeah, you guys definitely fight harder than anybody else in terms of business than I know. And I work with lots of different types of businesses doing what I do, but hospitality by far is my favourite, and it's the one that's got the, you know, what's it, the average 90% foul on average within the first 12 to 18 months. And then you just keep going, you always come back for more. Right, we're going to wrap it up there. thanks for coming, and everybody, thanks for attending. Sorry about the technical issues right at the beginning, but you know, I'm just a useless male amongst fantastic females that are doing all of the great work around me, and I just blame Jim, my tech guy, who's sitting here. Very
nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do with you at all. No. So thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciated you coming along, and you've all been, you know, great to chat to, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again very soon. Hopefully by then we'll have a little bit clearer of view on what's going on in the future and where this is all going to take us. Cool. Everybody.
Thank you
so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.